So today we're going to talk about boundaries with the challenging parts of others. This is actually part 4 of this part of the lesson. And these lessons have come from a book called Boundaries for Your Soul. It's a book by Allison Cook and Kimberly Miller. We've done a bunch of videos on these, so you can go back and listen to the other ones if you want to learn more about this. But what I want to talk about today is grace filling in the gaps. I love that statement, grace filling in the gaps. One time I couldn't make it to a meeting of a group that I was a part of, and I felt so anxious about it. And I got an email or a call from the guy who was leading these meetings, and he said, Vinny, there's always grace. Vinny, there's always grace. And I'll never forget that. That really made a big impact on me when he shared that with me. The Bible says nothing can separate us from the love of God. Through his life, death, and resurrection, Jesus offers boundless forgiveness to everyone that has a repentant heart. He forgives us and he cleanses us when we confess our sin to him. And because God offers forgiveness to us in such abundance, then that means we too are called to forgive. And sometimes we have to, in a sense, forgive ourselves or appropriate God's forgiveness for ourselves. And sometimes we have to learn how to forgive others. And of course, it's not easy. It's easy to talk about maybe, but it's not as easy to do. N.T. Wright, who's sort of a Bible theologian, says that in heaven, we'll be able to fully and finally forgive. We'll be able to fully and finally forgive. I love that statement. But the thing is, I'm living here on this earth, and this idea of full and final forgiveness is a bit elusive to me and to others that I've worked with. Down here below, we're going to need some help because we're not in heaven yet. So I want you to take this process, through and have you listen to an example from my life, and then I'll read through all these sentence stems again with you thinking about someone in your life that you've had some trouble forgiving. But so the incident, that's the first part of this first sentence stem. The incident was, in my case, a co-worker and a mentor of mine did some really hurtful things to some friends of mine. And as I think about this, the second part is, what is a time where I demonstrated even a little bit of the same behavior that this person has demonstrated? And as I think about it, yes, I've done some similar things to what my coworker and mentor did. And what hurt me most about this incident was, and I had trouble forgiving, was that my coworker was supposed to be helping us. But it turns out that he set us all back in some different areas where he was actually supposed to be helping us. And I think the worst thing about it is that he went about it in a really sneaky way so that my friends didn't even realize what he was doing. And the core wound that this touched within me from my childhood was that it reminded me of a few incidents in my childhood where I was totally confused and I didn't know what was going on in these situations. And I can see that my coworkers were confused when they interacted with this person. And so it was bringing me back to my child when I was confused. This feeling of helplessness and this feeling of being out of control that I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. The unspoken understanding that we had with this person, which was broken, was that they were supposed to be there to help us. And in fact, this person had told us to do and say things, and they did the exact opposite. So the aspect of my character that I think contributed to this particular conflict was that I wanted to get even with the person. I wanted to get revenge on them. I wanted to call the person up and to let them know that I knew where they were and I knew how to reach them, and that I knew what they had done, even if other people in their environment at that point didn't know. Of course, I didn't say anything like that, but I did make a call to the person, and it was kind of passive aggressive. A part of me wanted to know how the person was doing and wanted to wish them well, and another part of me wanted to throw them under a bus, all at the same time. And so I just beat around the bush. Hey, I was wondering how you're doing. I wanted to catch up with you, that kind of thing. What do I know or imagine about this person that might help me make sense of why he behaved the way he did? Well, I know this person grew up in a very strict family, a very high-profile family. And so I imagine living in an environment like that there's a lot of pressure to live up to a certain standard. The fears that I have about letting go of this particular thing that happened was, if I let this go, then this person's going to get away with what they did. Or if I let this go, my my friend's pain is going to be diminished if I let this go. Like I need to hold on to this for the sake of these people who have been hurt, because if I don't, their pain's going to be diminished. But the reality of who I am came through eventually. I'm forgiven, and so I can forgive this person. Is I am someone who wants well for others and not to harm them. And that was there in part, but not in whole yet. And also, I am someone who wants justice. And in this case, I wanted justice for my friends. The good in the bad, or the what might have been, and that I had to say or get ready to say goodbye to, was this. This resentment had been building up within me, or had been there and sort of festering for a little bit of time, for a while. And I needed to say goodbye to it. Things weren't perfect, and I made some mistakes, actually some mistakes that directly relate to the aftermath of this event. I have to own those mistakes that I made. I can't blame someone else for what they did in saying, now I did this and it's because of this person. Also, I can't hold on to my own mistakes. I can't hold them onto them forever. I have to let God forgive me for those things in a way, and I have to appropriate God's forgiveness. The gifts that I'm grateful to have gained from this painful experience are that I can learn how to forgive deep hurt and pain, that I could learn how to care about the feelings of others, that I could learn how to work through feelings, in this case, of envy toward this person because they had or were some things that I wanted to be, maybe jealousy or maybe pride. And actually also learning from the pride of this person, because the pride that they had was a sort of a distinguishing part of their character. And then also that I learned the difference between pride and confidence. So what I liked about this person is that they were confident, but along with that confidence also came a sense of pride that sort of mixed in there, and that was something I didn't really like about this person. The next piece of work that I need to do to continue the process of healing, is to tell my story to others so that they can learn with me. And so I guess that's a little bit of what I'm doing today. I want you to think of someone that you've had trouble forgiving for a moment. And I want you to think about the incident that you have trouble forgiving. Just see if you can figure out what that is. What is that incident? If you had to boil it down to one thing or one statement or one word, what would you put there? And then what is maybe a time where you demonstrated even a little bit of the same behavior that you're sort of focusing on in this person? Is there a time where you did or said something similar to what that person did or said? If not, just put no there. And the next one is, what hurt the most about the incident that I'm having trouble forgiving? So this kind of boils it down to, what is that thing that hurts the most about it? Just helps us get a little bit of clarity about what happened there. And then what is the core wound that it touched in my childhood? So when you think about this incident, you think about how you feel, and you think about maybe the image, you think about how your body reacts to that. Can you float back in time to an earlier time when you were younger, maybe a child, could be preschool, elementary, junior high, high school, even early adulthood, where you learned to feel that way? That's the idea, that this situation with the person that you're thinking about right now may have touched a core wound, something that goes back a ways. And then what was the unspoken understanding that we had, which was broken? In some cases, I guess we could say we had a spoken understanding. Like in marriage, you have vows, and somebody breaks vows. Well, that was a spoken understanding. Sometimes with the people that we're having trouble forgiving, we have an unspoken understanding, and it gets broken. If you had one of those, you could write down what that was. And then what's the aspect of your character that you think has contributed to this conflict? Now, let me just say this step does not apply if the injury occurred in childhood. If you were a child when this thing happened, this question is not really relevant. And so, to people who have been abused or something like that, there's nothing that would substantiate that someone should abuse another person. But as adults and as we mature, obviously there are parts of our character that contribute to the conflict that we have with another person, or that contribute to us holding on to resentment against that person. So we want to be aware of that and make note of that. What do you know or imagine about this person that helps you make sense of why he or she behaved the way that they did? This is helpful. We know things about some of the people who we're having trouble forgiving. It's good to kind of really try to get to understand them and what might be behind their behavior. Or sometimes we have to imagine it. We don't know them well enough. We have to imagine what life must have been like for this person for them to be treating people the way that they do today. That can give us a little bit of a sense of compassion for them. And then, what are the fears that you have about letting go at this time? What are those fears? What are you fearing that if I forgive this, I'll be letting go of this, and I just can't because of what? And then we really want to understand, what is the reality of who we are? We may be saying to ourselves some really negative things. I have a list over here of things that people tell me, like I'm worthless, I'm inadequate, I'm powerless, I'm weak, and so forth and so on. And sometimes I'll ask them, well, what would you rather say about yourself when you think about this thing that happened? And that's what we're getting at here, is what's the reality of who you really are? Am I a resentful person that wants to get revenge on everybody? No, not really. In this case, I did. For this part, there was a part of me that wanted that, but I was able to let that go because that's not really who I am. That's not who God made me to be. That's the result of sin in my life, but I can let go of that. I can choose to let go of that. So what is the reality of who you really are, in a positive way? What is the image of God that's been stamped on you, and how could we tap more into that? What is the good, the bad, or the what might have been that you're ready to say goodbye to? Sometimes we're not ready to forgive the whole thing or say goodbye to the whole thing, but maybe there's a piece of it that you're ready to say goodbye to. I guess we could start there first. And then, what are the gifts that you're grateful to have gained from this experience? What have you learned through it? Or what was maybe even a positive thing about the other person, to kind of force yourself to realize they weren't just good or bad, they're a mixture of them, of those two things, just like you are. And then asking this last question about, what's the next piece of work that I need to do in order to continue this process of healing on this particular piece of forgiveness for this particular person, for this particular incident. So that's the exercise. I hope you'll be able to use it now if you're struggling forgiving somebody, or in the future if you need to deal with forgiveness. Remember these truths from God's unshakable God's word, which is these are unshakable realities that apply to every part of life, every part of a life that is surrendered to Him. You are adopted, you are accepted, you are called by name, you are hidden with Christ, you are chosen, you are forgiven, you are washed clean, and you are redeemed. You have been given the Spirit of God, His strength, His mercy, His grace, and you have access to the very holy of holies. You have been given the mind of Christ. You are complete in Him. You are clothed with His righteousness, and you are secure in His love. And it is upon that basis that we are able then to work on forgiving others. All right, this discussion has been come from a book called Boundaries for Your Soul by Allison Cook and Kimberly Miller. Next week, we're going to kind of finish up this book and talk about the three parts of our soul one more time, just to make sure we understand what those vulnerable parts are, what are the parts of ourselves that are trying to protect those vulnerable parts, and what are the parts of us that just kind of want to throw a party all the time and distract ourselves from the realities of what it is that's going on in our lives. So if you want to join us, you can go to meetup.com/check your compass. Or you can check out our videos on YouTube and Facebook when we post them around once a week.